Okay, hi everyone. Let me just take the banner off. Yeah. Hey everyone, how's it going? I see folks in the chat. Let me know where you're joining from. Welcome to another stream. I think I've been back on a MLH stream after quite a while. I went back home for holidays, so let me know where you're joining from. What's going on? How has your Global Hack Week been going? Because this particular stream is a part of Global Hack Week as well as our MLH month-long hackathons. So I am super excited to be here, and we have Sarthi in the chat. I think I'm seeing you here for the first time. I see a lot of folks joining in. So we'll wait for them for a couple more minutes and make sure that you send a hi in the chat so that I know that you're joining here. Hi Shimade, how's it going? How were your holidays? For me, I went on a trip and I don't feel like being back in the work zone again. I want the holidays to be extended a little bit more, but that's okay. We have to get back to work. Uh, I am good. How are you? Okay, so some of you already know who our special guest is, but before I let them take over the stage, I'll introduce them first. We have Vineet Sood, who brings over 15 years of experience in software development, and that is something I am extremely excited for because I'm a fresher in the industry right now, and they've led high performance teams and driving inclusivity in technology industry. And they have a strong track record of leading large engineering organizations, partnering with cross functional teams to meet aggressive schedules, and adhering to approved budgets for both large consumer and enterprise companies and fast scalable startups. Wearing multiple hats and consistently learning new technologies. Vineet is here to talk about software development life cycle, its past, present, and future. And this is something I am extremely curious to know and excited to hear from an expert in the industry. So, without any further ado, I'll let Vineet take over the stage. Hi, Vineet, how's it going?
Hey Dikshita, hi. Thank you for the warm introduction.
So, I'll let you take over, but before that, we at MLS, what we do is that we always introduce ourselves with a fun fact.
Sure.
So, this time you'll have to take a fun fact because I am done with preparing new fun facts for every stream.
Fun fact is I have a dog and he is my work companion most of the time. So I have set up like his bed and everything in my office. So unfortunately, he's not here right now. Otherwise, I would have introduced you all to them.
MLH is famous for having their pets on stream, so we would have been very excited if your dog was here.
Yeah.
I am someone who's a little afraid of pets, but I love them from afar.
Yeah. Awesome. This is pretty, he's a very good boy. So he would have been like pretty happy as well to be on the stream.
Okay, so folks, I've shared the check-in link over here, and I'll let Vinny take over the stream, and I'll head backstage.
Awesome. Thank you, Dikshita.
You're
Hey
welcome.
all. So this is Vineet. I think Dikshita already introduced me. I'm currently an engineering manager at Meta, and I'll talk about this interesting topic, which has been very close to my heart, called software development lifecycle, and we'll talk about its past, present, and future journeys. So oftentimes when we talk about software development life cycles, it is pretty important, and it is very interesting both for not just for like the software engineers working on it, but also for like various people involved, including the users, right? So for example, as a user, if you're using Android or an iPhone, and if you have software updates coming in, you wanted to make sure that your day to day doesn't get disrupted because of those changes. The team who are pushing this also want to make sure that they're providing you the high quality output. And there's a lot that has goes on in terms of like planning and strategizing around this. And this this is a process which also has been evolving years over years. So, in short, software development lifecycle basically means the process that starts when someone starts thinking about an idea on they wanted to implement in terms of software code, or in terms of a project design, and then how we take it from design to development to rolling it out to users, as well as like post maintenance and stuff like that. So here, if you see, I have put in a picture of evolution. That is what exactly is happening with SDLCs. Very recently, there are like some interesting changes that has been happening in the industry, and we'll talk about that. But we'll also start with like how this SDL, I mean, how the industry used to do software code productions and how it has evolved over time, and what is the current most traditional way of doing it, and where the future, I mean, where the industry is going to take us next. So, if you look at the past, most of the companies used to follow waterfall method, right? And the reason that waterfall method was introduced was to improve the product quality. This is kind of pre and this is kind of not coming just from the software industry, but from like other projects. I think if you talk about tech, semiconductors are the semiconductor industry is the pioneer, which all kick-started the software revolution. And that's why, if you see, right, like we call San Francisco Bay Area as Silicon Valley, because silicon industry actually started here. So many of these projects, what used to happen was, they will fall out of budget, and it was also sometimes of poor qualities, and people were not sure, like, hey, how what happens after it has been released. There were like recalls that were happening when government started to make sure that they get also involved to ensure that the quality is there, as well as protecting consumer rights. So with that, and so earlier, basically it was very ad hoc process. Someone will start working on things, they will make it work as it go. A lot of wastage used to happen because of that, like a lot of silicon chips and all they used to throw away. And in order to improve that, they started with this waterfall method, where someone come up with an idea where they wanted to design and visualize this entire process beforehand, and then project plan it better. So if you see, this is how exactly it used to happen. And I mean, even in the software industry, before 15 years, most of the companies used to follow this approach. So you'll have sequential phases right over here. It is a rigid structure, but the rigid structure also provides more control and more visibility, as well as like more confidence to the company stakeholders that the product will be of a better quality when it gets released. It also gives an idea of when the product can potentially release, even though like some changes that can get introduced over time. Most of the time the companies used to follow the strict schedule and try to get the product out on the time. And I have myself, when I started my career, was doing this waterfall method for almost like a year. I think mostly around my internship, and then when I joined, it evolved into agile, and we'll talk about agile and scrum and all those good stuff right now. So yeah, as you say, you can have more control over execution timeline and budgeting here, uh, because budgets used to fall out of hand. So a project will start saying like, "Hey, I need 10 million for it." Eventually, it gets inflated, becomes like 30, 40 millions, right? A lot of Indian government projects and even like US government projects currently happen through this waterfall approach, because they have to publish out tenders, so they have to like design beforehand. The problem with this one, specifically apart from rigidity and structure, was if you have to make changes, these changes were difficult to uh, include in. And even though like halfway you're realizing that the product is failing, this model of project management wasn't like very useful. And surprisingly, so uh, the first thing that we see in, and we'll talk about like challenges right now. So the first challenges that we saw in this traditional SDLC is lack of adaptability. As I said, right, like if you're making changes and um, if you're trying to add new features, or if you're trying to revamp your product, it was very difficult. It was also very difficult to get feedback early on. Like if you are heading in the wrong direction with your respective product, like uh, Windows Vista is an example of that. It's very hard to rectify that and being able to like correct it, or maybe just like kill that project. Then that's where the second risk comes in: slow response to changes. And then it was high risk, because there is a chance that the entire product, you will spend your entire budget on this thing without killing your product, or like without making changes, and it will be a failure. And it was very hard to figure that out. Um, so then this present agile methodology evolved, and it surprisingly it came from not software industry but from auto manufacturer, specifically Toyota. So if you see, currently Japanese car manufacturers have a very high standard in terms of reliability. And what used to happen earlier was Japanese products didn't have that. And a lot of these companies used to struggle around product quality, which kind of had an impression among consumers. And this is around like 1990s, where people used to feel like, hey, Japanese products are either like make or break. So it can either work throughout the years, or it may not scale. So what they did was, and I'll go back to talking to an example of Toyota, who actually invented one of the agile methodology called Kanban. So instead of asking, or instead of strict asking factory workers to stick to the schedule and like getting the car released, they basically had a cord in the factory, and they asked each worker, and they basically gave ownership to each worker in the factory to pull that cord if anytime they feel that there's a production issue that's happening in either of the car, so that the company can rectify it and prevent it for like other cars. It worked out really well for them, and it also worked out really well for the software industry. So that's why this agile methodology involved. The interesting thing about agile is it's a spiral. So at each stage of the spiral, if you see, the last stage feeds in, like stage number 5 feeds back into stage number 1. So basically what happens is you continue with this process, then you make small changes, you get collect feedback based on these changes, and then you feed that feedback back into your initial planning process, and then you keep on improving the product quality. And we'll also talk about like what are the challenges with this approach. And currently, when I say this is a present method, it's not like one size fits all. So there are companies, even like pretty well-known companies, that uses a combination of agile and waterfall. Some companies strict also still uses waterfall. I mean, government tenders, as I said, is one example of that. And then there are like companies who just follow agile. The popularity of agile also came in because of a lot of the evolution of or like tech evolution, digital evolution that happened around 2003 and around like 2008. A lot of these startups were able to make small changes which these big companies were not able to do very fast, and these small companies evolved into the Google and Meta for today. So will this agile methodology kind of help them make these small changes and get feedback fast and then improve their product very quickly. And this is one of the way that a lot of like uh, on most of like high tech companies operate today. So if you see, the first one is evaluation of processes. So basically what we do in the start of Agile is we'll create user stories. I mean, there are like a couple of Agiles. Actually, I'm running ahead right now. So there are like different type of Agiles. I think I started talking about Sprint, but I'll hold on to that. But if you see in a basic spiral, you start with evaluation of their requirements, and then you basically create suggestions and do process optimization at stage number 2. This is where you also look at the ideas, and then the third stage is where you actually build it. So you application, you do the design, and then third and fourth stage is like design and development. Fifth stage is you evaluate the product, and then you also involve your product stakeholders right into this entire process, so they keep on giving you feedback at each stage, like how the process is going, and then that feedback feeds back into stage 1. This is also one of the most popular approach that is being used today. So if you have intern somewhere, or if you have friends working in software industry, and or if you are working yourself, you see like the stand-ups and scrums and all these words related to agile that happens every day today. So advantages of agiles are it's a faster delivery. You can have small changes rolled out very fast. The customer feedback is available right at the moment, and then you can have improved quality. Um, and there are three type of agile that are very popular in the industry. The first one is called Scrum. This is mostly used by development teams. So what happens in Scrum is the team starts with creating user stories based on the requirements that the product managers provide to them. Then based on that, they start like talking about creating working on those user stories, and then doing testing around that user stories, and then they create tasks for each one of the people involved in that, and that can also include creating tasks for someone who's gonna look at it later, maybe like a product manager or user testing team and stuff like that. And then it keeps, and they keep on releasing this what is it, yeah, these software features in multiple small releases instead of doing like a one giant release at a time. This is also the reason why you have a software major releases and minor versions available on most of the apps today. So if you have like minor version upgrades, that's because of Scrum. Kanban became very popular by Toyota. It's also used by development teams, but is very popular among support and maintenance teams, where they try to basically anytime you create an issue, and also among on call now with engineers. So basically, if you have an issue, you create a ticket, and the ticket that has highest priority, you basically gets to solve first. So instead of like trying to take sequentially working on issues that they come to you, you prioritize and take the highest priority ticket or the issue and then try to resolve it. And then the third one is continuous integration. This is kind of evolution of agile. So, and you might have heard about automation of some of the development processes. This is where continuous integration comes in, where we are removing manual steps. So you have like code pipelines built in right into your infrastructure that can release code and identify issues and even do rollbacks. AWS is it's pretty good in that. So if you have uh, software release that's breaking the half of their infrastructure, and a lot of like companies rely on AWS for the cloud powering their sites and stuff like that. The AWS will try to roll it back. Facebook does it pretty well too. So we have this continuous integration. Like if we see that the rollout is causing impact to the site, like feature, the automation systems will automatically roll the software back, and you will not be able to see like any disruption from a user's perspective. This also goes back to removing the manual step. Like I mean, earlier most of these things used to happen manually, where there's a person involved in doing coding. I mean, monitoring the pipelines and making sure that if the site goes down, then gets an issue used to get assigned and all. Instead, now systems are taking like action on their own. And emerging trends is DevOps integration. I think you already talked about it just now. Then the second one is AI-driven development and low-code platforms. And this is where the future of SDLC is heading towards. So AI-driven development is also very interesting. And we'll talk about each one of them. I have like diagrams prepared. So DevOps integration, let's start with DevOps integration again. So we have collaboration, continuous delivery, and automation built in here. So if you see what happened here is the uh, entire code release cycle has been automated, right? And again, if you see, this is a modified version of that spiral, but it still feeds back into the original original start step. So it's again like a continuous feedback loop that has been created. The main difference here between agile or the traditional agile and DevOps integration is uh, the automation stuff. So if you see, and most of the companies have invested very heavily into automation. And now, I mean, there are like services like Google Cloud, AWS, Azure available to provide uh, what is it, DevOps as a service to new startups and to like to their customers, so that they don't have to worry about setting all this up and deploying or like managing how the software code releases are happening, right? It starts so we can start with the dev cycle, and then we go back into the ops cycle. So if you see, you start by building and doing a design for your code, and then you basically you start with like coding your design, coding your system, and then you go back into like building it. Building is not just like creating binary files, or if you have Java, then creating jar files or JREs and stuff like that. Then you deploy them and you start testing them. Either you can test it locally, or you have like some test systems available, and after that you release it. Now when you are planning to release it, you also have to deploy it. Most of the software companies right now are global, so they also want to make sure that their um, what is it, the reliability is like 5 nines, which basically means they're available for 99.99999 percentage. So they try to deploy it on multiple sites, and this is where the magic or the automation happens, where the deployment starts happening on each site, and then there are load balancers which make sure that traffic doesn't get passed over to the new site unless there's like substantial amount of code or binary files available which they can basically route the request over to. Then it's around like operation, which is around like virtualization, containerization. So virtualization specifically gained more popularity after introduction of cloud services, because earlier everyone used to have their own data center. Very few people cared about virtualization because if they're moving systems and all, it was more in their control. Now with clouds, what can happen is like you can sign up a cloud contract with AWS, and later if you want to move to Azure, it was a pain. I had done that in one of my previous jobs, and it was super difficult. And we also ended up using Dockers, which is a popular container choice. What happens here is uh, instead of directly deploying and relying on the cloud service, you create a virtual layer in between the cloud service and your code base, and that virtual layer will then instead of like what do you say, and that virtual layer will take care of uh, doing or like calling services on the cloud itself. So instead of like, let's say, using EC2, or I don't know we call what they call it in Azure right now, but like an Azure VM and all, you just like create your Docker containers, and Docker will take care of the underlying cloud infrastructure and connecting with that. You can just move your code as it is into a different cloud system without worrying too much, and Docker containerization will like evolve into it. And now many of cloud services are also providing this as an option to keep the customers engaged on their platform. Then the next one is monitoring. So monitoring, logging, there are logging services, and companies are built around logging and visualizations as well. Actually, for virtualization, one of the very popular company that came into existence is VMware, that actually started and kickstarted some of these virtualization techniques, and still like doing a lot of good work in that area. And monitoring is around like logging. So you have Spark loggers, or there are like CloudWatch, which is available in AWS, or many companies have their own version of logging, monitoring, and stuff like that. There are companies like Datadog and all, which feeds logging data and then can predict whether your system will work or not. And then visualizations are same thing. So you have loggings and you want to see like how your system is performing. You feed it into a visualization system that will create graphs and all for you. From there, again, you go, once you have monitored your software, now you try to, all these signals are going to feed back into some of your requirements, apart from the new requirements that are coming in. And you will feel like, hey, I feel our systems is not reliable. Maybe we should do or maybe the user is giving the logging. I mean, there are like a lot of login failures that are happening. So let's try to plan to improve that feature. And that basically how it feeds back into the plan cycle, and then you start this entire thing again. um, Many For example, like you can look at your logging signal and try to also see how your systems are behaving, right? For example, you expected 5 million users, but there's only 100K users, but you realize that's because a lot of users are dropping out as the keyboard is not working, or some other app issues and all, right? So this is where a good logging is very useful. But with introduction of these systems and data processing tools like Datadog and Spark and all, it makes it easier for us to visualize and take actions faster, rather than like trying to read through each log line and then trying to see how the trend is happening. And they can also do a trend analysis over period of time, so you can figure out like where the dropout was happening and when it actually improved. Awesome. Next is AI driven development. So this is very new in the industry right now, and there is not a lot of things that has happened yet. However, it is also evolving very fast. Uh, the main disruption right now, which is in this on the development side from AI, is around content generation, and which is mostly happening through companies like OpenAI, Meta, and Google. So there is a lot of content that is getting generated automatically by AI by analyzing uh, what do you say by analyzing uh, code and documents, and this will most likely also start impacting the tech industry soon. However, there are some things which can, like tech, even Chat GPT today can do, right? For example, code generation. So you can start uh, asking it to create small code snippets. It's able to do generate that, but it's still again content generation. I won't say it's being able to like translate business requirements. Meta launched Llama 2, which is a very popular open source AI framework, and I think that is also kind of very interesting. If you have and use Llama 2, you can go to GitHub and try to install that. It's trained by I think 5 billion data set models, but or like some billions of data set models, but it's like pretty impressive as well, and one of the pioneer open source and most popular open source project right now. Predictive analysis does happen. So AI systems are able to predict when there's a system failure. It's still not very accurate. You still need manual intervention, and you need like what do you say, an entire DevOps team. But I think over time, this may reduce, where you will start seeing more and more um, uh, more and better reliable systems, and as well as like it can go back into that automation thing that we talked about, where this signal can feed and can help automation take over and like do some analysis early on rather than like after failure. So this will most likely be a reactive, sorry, a proactive fixing of issues rather than reactive. But yeah, the code generation is happening. There are like code templates and all that, boilerplate code templates that can get created through AI, but it's still very primitive. Automation testing tools are also there, but I don't see. I mean, as far as I have seen, I haven't seen like much AI based testing so far. But definitely, content generation is one area where AI has been very revolutionary and disruptive, and I think eventually it will also get into the code generation, into the coding portion, and it's not bad. I think a lot of people have viewpoints around it. I feel like a lot of the manual steps that engineers do today will and which they hate doing, I think AI is kind of going to help them. I don't see any time soon where AI can change or like can take over the industry, but again, it is very early on, and we'll see like how this evolves. It's also very costly to run AI. So there, as in like whenever we look at software, there'll always be like a trade-off that needs to be made. Okay, logo development. This is very interesting. It's available. A lot of systems are available right now, where specifically like workflow building. So this gives power back to some of the users who used to rely on having IT teams do that. For example, creating workflows. There are like a lot of good tools available around that. You can do faster prototyping. You can quickly visualize how your workflow would look like, and maybe like do a quick demo, and this reduces coding efforts. Again, there is still some code snippets that needs to be done, but I think it can reduce coding if you're doing some generic stuff by almost 75 to 80%. uh, Again, very good for upcoming and small companies. This may not still work well for larger companies, which where the problem of scale becomes a challenge, and there are like some customizations and all they have to put in to evolve their businesses as well. But still a very good option that is available right now, and a lot of marketing agencies and marketing teams uses this. Okay. Okay, I wanted to close this with uh, quote by Benjamin Franklin saying, "Change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will determine your success in life." Right. So I would say that will continue to happen not only in SDLC but anywhere in the industry. Right. I mean, if you look at the way cars used to look like 5 years back, and now, I mean, it has changed completely. We are moving from gas engines or combustion engine ice to combustion ice engines to uh, electric vehicles very fast. a lot of disruption happening throughout in farming industry and all. And I mean, software industry is not immune to that because I mean, software industry is actually one of the industry that reacts to changes very fast. But a lot of these changes are going to be very interesting and helpful for the long term, and it would also mean that the way we do things will change over time. And most of the people in software industry, like I have been working for last 15 years, I have seen changes almost every 2 years. And I think and sometimes every like 6 months as well, right? Like it is, I mean, back in the day Java used to be popular, and now Python take over, Golang is becoming popular now. uh, uh, AI has come in as well, so I think it will be very, I mean, it's a very I think if you're a software engineer, I think change is something that you should get adapted to very fast. Awesome. That's about it for my session. Um, Dikshita, I mean, we can do the Q&A.
Yeah, folks, feel free to ask any questions that you have. Meanwhile, I have a question. I am someone who's a fresher in the industry right now, and when you mentioned about AI and automation, so even though like these are the new firms, there's low code development, but doesn't it somehow just remove the joy of coding or the part where you used to code? Since AI and automation are making a lot of things easier for you, but at the same time, um, I I personally am someone who really enjoys coding and building products. So doesn't it remove that particular part or reduce coding quite a
Yeah.
lot?
Um, so far, not 100%. So it can generate boilerplate code for you, for example, and which I think even happens if you're using IntelliJ or Eclipse and stuff like that. Node.js manager and Visual Studio. So they generate like getters and setters for you, right? Like no one, I mean, if you have a class with 1,000 variables, you don't want to like spend I mean spend time writing getters and setters for each one of those. Uh, so I think the business logic, the interesting part around coding is still the implementing the business logic and understanding requirements. So that still remains. Uh, but yeah, time over time, if it continues to automate and if it continues to generate that, uh, I think you may be right. But at least currently it's not how it's not exactly like usable, and a lot of these systems are for like generic stuff. So for example, like small mom and pop shops who cannot afford to hire a software engineer, or even like go to have their own website, I think it makes a lot of stuff easier for them. But if you are like Pepsi's and Coke or of the world, you still need like these automation. I mean, you still need to rely on like human to code logics for you.
Yeah, right. I was talking about the future scenario right now. I know that we still need to
Yeah,
work a lot for the boilerplate code, but this is something in the future scenario. If we keep automating things,
yeah.
at one point we'll be able to automate almost the entire product.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go back in the history, I mean, automation has been happening for ages, right? We started growing crops at that time. People felt like, hey, what would happen to fruit collectors? When industrialization came in, it was a huge disruptor. Automation is gonna be a huge disruptor, but I think we will find out something else and more important to work on. Um, it would take away the joy for sure from coding, but it would create like new opportunities for us to look into. For example, like if you see, I feel like right now overall as an industry we spend I mean, I'm not overall as like the countries and all, they spend like very less budgeting and less effort on, let's say, space programs, so they may be able to like spend more time there. And same thing is true for farming, right? Like all the farmers who are not working right now are now doing like other things, which would have required like more human labor before all this industrialization and automation that happened.
Understood. We have a question from the chat. Are other process models still used in industry like V model, prototype, etc.?
Yes, they are used. So I think prototyping is a very V model. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but prototyping for sure is still being used. So a lot of companies, when they want to start a product or they have an idea, they want to do a prototype first and then run through that prototype, and like get early feedback from customers. So it's that hasn't changed. um, but yeah, I think it still happens. Even like some of these traditional models are being used even in the software industry for budgets which needs to be controlled. Like one of the main problem for agile is the budget can go out of control very fast, very easily, uh, and sometimes you may be making constant changes, but that still is not moving the needle.
What do you suggest doing to keep their skills relevant with growth of automation?
Yeah, I would recommend definitely like learning some of these new techs stack and not get very rigid on, hey, I know Python, I'll only do Python, stuff like that. Gen AI, for example, is good. I mean, again, it's for content generation, but they're like machine learning models and all that you can get used to. I'm encouraging my teams a lot to learn about it. There are these new AWS features, for example, that keeps on rolling out. Maybe get yourself familiar. I feel one thing that should change over time is the difference between academics and the industry. I think industry is way ahead, and academics still continues to teach traditional software coding practices, which is kind of a shocker for people when they join. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say learning those new tech skills, uh, getting, I mean, 2 3 years back, blockchain was the thing. Right now, AI is the thing. I mean, things will continue to evolve, but you have to like seize the right opportunity. And people who learn blockchain, I mean, blockchain is very interesting. I always felt it could replace, and I still feel it can replace some of the transaction systems, because instead of like having a central system controlling these transactions, it was a distributed way of doing it. And it may come back, but yeah, getting read a lot about the industry, see what's going on, and don't get rigid. I mean, it is even true. Like 15 years back, when the automation was not this much. If you are like, hey, I only know .NET and I'll not get into Java, I think that was like not very helpful. If you're talking about books and stuff like that, there are like sites like Coursera, which I like. I mean, personally, has like a lot of good content. I have read into and like looked at, so I would recommend that.
Yeah, I think educational resources still teach you under waterfall model. When I entered my internship and they were
Yeah,
like, we're going to have scrum meetings every week, I was
yeah,
like, okay, what's that?
yeah. And some of these can evolve. I don't think it makes sense to teach people how to multiply when calculators are available. Like I myself have forgotten how to do that. So I think it needs to evolve for sure. And there are like some, and I mean, even if you see the way we learn is also changing. I think there long back we didn't before Coursera and all, there was like we used to read books. Now there's like YouTube videos and courses available. And,
There
uh,
are audiobooks, people just listen to them on Spotify and keep going.
yeah, yeah, and there's like collective collaborative learning happening too through some of these sites. I would also actually encourage to. I don't have a list on top of my mind. I can put in YouTube comment if I find something good. But basically, this collaborative learning is also very helpful, where you can like connect virtually with anyone in the world who is similar interest and try to learn things together.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of communities and Discord servers people can join and meet new folks who are already working on the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, MLH is a pretty good example of that, right? Like joining and being able to talk to people living different parts of the world and trying to learn the same thing together. It always like escalates that.
Right. So I think we have 15 more minutes, and I'm going to ask one question which will take a little bit of time.
Sure.
So you have 15 years of experience and you're working at Meta right now. How has your journey been? Can you just try to describe that in 15 minutes?
Sure. Um, yeah, so journey has been interesting, and I have tried out the different type of industries. So I started my career in 2009, which was not a good time because of recession. And I wasn't what is I wasn't it was like an interesting time, and I started my first job actually as an uh, teaching professor in a college, since there were no jobs available. And then I switched over, and I got there were like campus offers and all. No one was like calling you during the session, so that's what was happening. um, After that, I joined Adobe, and it was very impressive because I realized like the tech industry changes very fast, and they were like making constant changes, product updates. They had this technology called Flex, which was very popular, and Adobe just decided to kill it to give way to HTML5. Still, I can remember about that. Then I have transitioned to cybersecurity at Symantec. It was pretty impressive to see like how different and how difficult cybersecurity jobs are compared to like traditional product engineering and stuff like that. Um, yeah, and I think after that I was at Amazon for a few years. I was managing multiple teams there. I transitioned into management actually in Semantic, and that was more from my team. I was still happy with the hands-on coding stuff, and I still do hands-on coding today. Is one thing for sure I miss about the job. I think, as you said, right, the joy of coding is very fruitful and rewarding.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, I started a startup as well. It was Startups are like very very interesting. If all of you are looking for like opportunities, I think trying. I mean, many times we ignore startups, but they are like very good. And then Meta is like very great. So it has been. I mean, I have an amazing team. I joined during COVID. The teams were distributed. Managing distributed teams is a very difficult. Is I thought it would be difficult, but it actually turned out to be easier. Just because if you have the right people and all, it helps a lot. Uh, but yeah, I think overall, I would say the transitions that I have seen in the industry has been pretty big. Sometimes these disruptions can cause panic, but I have seen like it hasn't like I mean it hasn't like impacted much apart from the fact that you now will be working and like exploring some new things. And Gen AI is an example. Oculus is another example, right? Like, and the companies are still passionate about some of these things. So I think they will continue to evolve into something better. And time over time, we will see how, uh, like, what new other things come in. I think, as I said, like, blockchain is one thing which I was very interested and impressed about, because the way they distributed transactions was very impressive. In you can actually move blockchain. You can make a phone the amount the type of chip and RAM that we have on our phone right now. I didn't used to have that in PC like 15, 20 years back when I was in school. So yeah, that's about my journey.
That's amazing. That's like quite a lot of experience and in different fields all combined in one.
Yeah.
Um, there is a question in the chat. You mentioned 2009 being a challenging time to join the industry. With your experience, do you think that's happening now? I graduate in 2025, but I see new grads struggling to find employment. I have heard this scenario because I was in the placement cell while I graduated like a year ago. So currently, the new grads right now are saying that there's a lot of crisis and they're not getting as high placements as our batch did. So what's your take on this one?
Yeah. Uh, I think 2009 was more challenging than today. 2009 was a time when a lot of people actually lost jobs. I mean, if you can go back and read news if I'm making this up, but the industry kind of like paused for a while. What has changed right now is companies are just uh, still hiring a lot. Like there's a lot of hiring going on, and uh, in almost all companies that I know of in the industry. I think for a new grad, it may be challenging because it is challenging compared to like 2 years back, 2 3 years back for sure. But it's not as challenging as it was before then. I would recommend that look for opportunities, start working on something. They're like very interesting. As I said, like startup is one thing which I used to ignore when I graduated, but now going back, I think it is interesting the way startups work and the amount of visibility and all that you can get. Companies like Meta and Google and all are hiring, so I don't see uh, it is as bad. But yeah, I would do acknowledge that it is not as easy as it was like 2 3 years back. Um, yeah, but I don't think it's like exactly happening as 2000. I think the industry is recovering very fast. And I mean, we had a global pandemic uh, 3 years back, and there are like other world events that has also happened since then. So there were like some minor disruptions, but I don't see that was a major
I
like
think
financial market failure that happened in like 2008.
I think it's more like during the pandemic, a lot of companies hired a lot because they needed a lot of tech support there. And now, since we are back to all offline mode, hybrid mode, they are getting back to the normal level
Yes.
of hiring. And because we've already seen like such a large hiring, people are comparing it to that particular year and saying that it's
Yeah,
not that right,
exactly.
because all the batch sizes and all colleges have more students working in the field now. So compared to as many students there, and if we see the hiring, then there is a ratio which is not getting placed in those companies, and they do not consider other options. They're only looking at the FANG title. So I
Yeah.
think that's probably one thing because of which they're considering that hiring is not that great right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. I think fair comparison should be with 2017 or 2019, like right before pandemic, and I think it's still better than that. Uh, and yeah, I think Fang titles are great, and Fang also is used to be hard to get into. Like I haven't got into my first try as well. Uh, None of the people that I know have got into their first try, so it requires like some time and some experience to build in.
Right. So speaking of like new technologies, what is like that one particular new technology upcoming which is like really exciting? Blockchain is something you mentioned, but something apart from that, if there's
Yeah,
any.
Llama 2. So Llama 2 is a very interesting open source project that, and I'm pretty excited about it, partially because also I work at Meta, so I've seen Llama 2's like impact. But I think trying to open source, it's a big step by anyone, right? Like you have other companies trying to build over the product, and then Meta coming in and trying to open source an entire AI platform and like AI model, and then share it with the community. I think it was a huge step. And I some of the I mean, it's so available as I said on open source, so it's one of the most downloadable project as well. I think is it takes some time to get used to it, but it has. I mean, this the way they have trained the model and the way the model responds is pretty good.
Okay, so I think we are almost on time. Vineet, is there something you want to add before I conclude the session?
Uh, just one thing, I think this is an thank you for the opportunity. It was fun conversing with you and with the community. I've been part of MLH now for some time, and the way this community has been growing and is the way they engage is like pretty impressive to see that. So thank you all for like being part, for including me as part of this community too.
Thank you so much, Vineet. I think I have learned a lot of insight from you, and so have our community. And thank you everyone for joining. But before I conclude the session, we have our month long hackathon going on, and this particular session was a part of it. So make sure that you register, have fun, build something new, and learn, and always try to experiment on new tech stacks. And happy hacking, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And have a good night, good morning, good day for whoever is joining from whichever time zone. I'll see you all in some other stream. Happy hacking. Bye.
Good one all. Bye.